Good evening. This is the JP Dinnell podcast, episode 35. I am JP Dinnell, and as always, I have Lucas with me. So, what I'd like us to talk about is from Extreme Ownership, Chapter 12, The Dichotomy of Leadership. It's actually going to be on page 276, where the principle that we're talking about is being competitive, but also a gracious loser. So, in the book, Jocko and Leif wrote about how leaders must have a competitive spirit, but also be gracious losers. They must drive competition and push themselves and their teams to perform at the highest level. They must never put their own drive for personal success ahead of the overall mission. Ahead of the overall mission, success for the greater team. Leaders must act with professionalism and recognize others for their contributions. So I would like us to dive into and talk about, friendly competition versus the divisive infighting that we can see. It happens a lot with teams. And, let's talk about like what type of competition is healthy and where it becomes a problem. So here's the deal. In the SEAL teams, competition is a way of life. It's legitimately a way of life for us in the SEAL teams. It drives our performance in everything that we do. We would jokingly say that if there's more than one person, more than one guy on a run, it becomes a race. Now, we might go out for a long conditioning run. And I know I've talked about this before where, we go out for a run and, hit that turnaround point. It's 100% a run. And it turns into a race for sure on the way back. And that's just the competitive nature that we had in the SEAL teams. And that's a good thing. Like, that's a good thing because it drives us to perform. That's where your ego comes into play in a good, healthy manner, where your ego drives you to perform and to perform at a high level, to be pursuing excellence, to achieve excellence, to maintain excellence. And that's something that we would do and strive for in the SEAL teams. But we have to be careful because it's easy to get sucked into bad mouthing someone who's beating you or accusing them of cheating. And so what drives that? Well, that's also our ego, because our ego can be hurt and it can be damaged and it can be sensitive at times. Like I said, our ego is a great thing because it drives us, but it can also be a pretty bad and horrible thing if we don't learn how to subordinate and control our ego when it comes to our competitive nature and drive to be better. Yes, I like to win for sure. I think I hate losing more than I love winning. That's something that my buddy Andy Frisella is talking about. He goes, "Do you love winning more, or do you hate losing more than you love winning?" And I think I hate losing more than I love winning because I don't like that feeling. And there's some people that are completely fine with losing and learning from those times. And I agree, you should learn, but you should also learn from your wins as well. And I think it's a dangerous place that people can play when they're saying like, I don't really care if I lose as long as I'm learning and growing. That's fine. Okay, maybe, but are you using that as a little alibi and a get out of jail free for your poor performance? And that's something that we have to be honest with ourselves and actually think about. My parents taught us to be competitive. My parents taught us to work hard, but my parents also taught us to play to win. Like, you want to win, you want to succeed, you want to you want to be the one with your hand raised. You want to be the one that's victorious. And that's a good thing. But here's the thing. I'm not going to sabotage somebody if they're beating me, and I'm not going to badmouth them if they beat me. And I would love to say that I've always maintained that. However, that's not true, because there's been times in my life that I've failed to maintain the moral high ground. And unfortunately, there's been times where I've made excuses and I badmouthed other people that beat me, and it was sad. But hey, uh, as a Christian man, like, I need to recognize that that's one, not a good thing to do. That's not a good way to build relationships, and it's not a good example for me to be setting for my kids and for my team. Don't do these things. Like, these are things that unfortunately have become some of our natural tendencies, the natural tendency to sabotage somebody if they're starting to beat them, because your ego gets so affected and inflamed and in the way of you making logical decisions, and the natural tendency to make excuses and badmouth somebody else or accuse them of cheating because you weren't able to perform at a high level and win. And unfortunately, these are things that most people have done most of their life. and they've seen family members and friends and people around them doing those things, and they just think that that's okay to do. So instead, I challenge you to choose to learn from those people that beat you, to build a better relationship, to ask them for help. And that's what's cool. We see that sometimes with these UFC fighters where they'll have like, a legit fight, and then they get beat by a guy and they're like, "Hey man, you want to come help me on my next camp?" Or they'll switch camps to go start training with that guy. And they're like, "Hey, obviously, man, this guy's training's better, his environment's better. He's consistently beat me, like, hey, maybe I need to go, you know, learn from them and learn from that individual." And man, to me, that's a pretty good form of humiliation. I'm sorry, of humility, is when you've been humiliated in a loss. Because hey man, you lose in like a big UFC fight or a big jiu-jitsu match, it's easy to get humiliated. But when you can come back from that and show humility and say, "Hey, I need your help. Hey, I want to learn from you." I think that's a pretty cool thing. And that's something that we should all strive for, is to have that humility to ask for help, to build a relationship, and to learn about them. And this is something in the SEAL teams we would do out on the shooting range, in the kill house. We do it with our gear in the gym. And to be honest, almost all of the training scenarios that we had, if somebody was doing something better, we wouldn't ridicule them. We wouldn't accuse them from cheating. We wouldn't try to sabotage them. Instead, it'd be like, "Hey, man, I noticed that your draw with your pistol is super smooth. Like, how do you have your holster set up? Hey, what type of holster are you using? Did you go out and buy that on your own? Is that a different high speed holster than we get issued? Or, hey, what techniques have you been using on the shooting range? Because your transitions from rifle to pistol back to rifle is smooth, man. I notice you're very efficient with your motions. Can I film you and study that film?" Like, that's literally like stuff that we would do to improve our skill sets. We would debrief and talk about everything that we did in the SEAL teams, because we were constantly trying to learn from each other. And yes, we were super competitive, but we were also gracious in defeat when we were competing against our teammates and our buddies, because there's an opportunity for us to learn from them. We all wanted to be better. Trust me, I promise you, every single one of us in the SEAL teams wanted to be better. And here's the other thing to think about. If you're winning, you should probably help the people. And I remember this is something actually Leif and I talked about like 3 years ago on an Extreme Ownership Academy session that we were doing, about, hey, if you're in a position where you're doing well and you're winning, you should help the people around you that aren't doing as well, that aren't as successful. Like, hey, pass on the lessons that were learned, and share the best practices. These are things that we should be doing as good teammates, as good leaders, as good humans. Because like Jocko and Leif talk about in Extreme Ownership, if the team wins, everybody wins. If the team fails, everybody fails. This is cover move. This is what we talk about in cover move. I talked about this today with the client. I'm up here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Been working with Missouri River Energy Sources all day yesterday, all day today. I'll be working with them all day tomorrow. We're doing an FTX with them in August. I'll be back up here in November for 3 more. I mean, they've made a big investment into their people. And one of the big things that we were talking about is the principle of cover move and building relationships, and understanding like, hey, if another team is losing, that's a bad thing. I need to cover down. I need to help them out. I need to help build them up. And if we have the winning formula, we need to share that. We need to pass that on with the people around us. Yes, to recap, competition is good. Competition drives the standards. It drives high performance. It's a healthy thing, but it can become unhealthy if you don't control it. And it can actually become a bad thing when people forget, like, hey, what's our overall mission? And it's for the team to be better. That's honestly what it is. And if I'm thinking about taking care of the team and accomplishing the mission, and I'm thinking strategically, then that allows me to keep that competition in check, and allows me to actually be healthy. And unfortunately, there are people that will actually ruin relationships for the initial tactical win, right? That little tactical victory of going out there and getting the win. But at what cost? Is it worth ruining a relationship? No. When you put your own needs and or your the needs of the immediate team above others, that's a problem. And we need to be aware of those things, because our natural tendencies are actually to be selfish. Our natural tendencies are to take care of ourselves for, it's that, oh, that survival instinct. You got to take care of yourself. Well, there is some truth there. We have to understand that as good leaders, as good humans, we have to find the balance between that competitive drive, the desire and drive to win at all cost, versus, hey, what's realistic. Echelon Front put out a video about this recently. They're promoting one of the events that we have called the Council, which is a phenomenal event that we have at Echelon Front. If go to echelonfront.com, click on events, click on the Council. If you have the ability to do it, it's 100% something that you should do. And there's a video of Jocko talking about there about how people are like, win at all costs. Win, that's a great mindset to have, is drive, drive, drive. But you have to understand it, like, at what cost? And sometimes the win at all costs means, I have to be able to subordinate my ego and ask for help and build relationships, and not ruin relationships. And that's what winning looks like. When you really think about what winning looks like, it's building relationships, having influence over people, having a good community, a good team that's successful, that's healthy, that's thriving, and and being able to help drive and push your competitive nature upon your teammates, so that they want to win, so that they feel like they can win. Because here's the deal, there's going to be times where you might have a team that is just burnt out, or they're just like, hey, cool, check, roger that, I'm going to do the bare minimum, because they've been either verbally abused in the workplace, or they've been demoralized and pushed down. And maybe sometimes those people need to be built up and lifted up, and that's on you. That's on you as a leader. That's on you as a human, to instill that competitive nature into your people, so that they understand why winning is a good thing. But the balance between being competitive and a gracious loser is something that's imperative. That's why Jocko and Leif wrote about it in Extreme Ownership under Dichotomy of Leadership. They also wrote about it in Dichotomy of Leadership. They dove a lot deeper into it. And it's a very important principle that we as humans should be aware of. So just something I wanted to start off the night for us to be thinking about as we open up this podcast. Again, we appreciate all the support. You guys listening, liking, commenting, subscribing has been absolutely incredible. The growth of the podcast because of you, our listeners, is humbling. So we want to thank you for that. And I also want to say, what's up, Lucas? Good evening.
Going on,
How are
man?
you?
I'm great. How are things in Sioux Falls?
Man, it's good. Ideally, I always thought that the only way and the best way for us to do this podcast was in person. And if I'm being honest, I would prefer to be in person with you.
For
So
sure.
when you talk about drip and all your teenage slang terms that you learned from your youth group, I can't fulfill Kramer's desire for me to want to punch you across the screen.
I mean, you
However,
you might still want to. It's just
well,
going to be a lot more difficult.
actually
Yeah.
I can't actually like threaten it, because you'd be like, cool, go ahead and try. But
This is true.
man, it's cool that we're able to do this. Um, Especially just with the dynamic of what's going on with your wife and kids and family and my
Yeah,
travel and
man.
everything else like that. And man, I failed to prioritize getting this recorded last week when we had a couple windows. And I violated the principles that we teach, and instead of us having this done in person, here we are, my man. So what's up?
Dude, I'm fascinated by this whole topic, right? So I've read both the books, Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy of Leadership, and this idea of being a good winner and a gracious loser, I think, is something that's really applicable in all areas of life. And I do find that that's something that I have struggled with in the past, because I tend to minimize my wins and losses. Like, I don't, one of the things you said is, like, you learn a lot from your wins, right?
You
I
should.
I go in with the attitude that I expect to win. And
Oh yeah.
so when I do, I don't ever review it. I don't think about the things that I did well. And nor am I gracious in victory typically, because I don't celebrate, right? And there are some people that, and I found this out, that, like, the fact that I don't have any emotion connected to a win, whether it's a board game or athletic thing or whatever, that I'm not fired up about it, that bothers some people. On the
Hmm.
flip side, the lack of, I always felt like the lack of emotion when I lost made me a gracious loser, but really it didn't. So many times what I was doing is I was internalizing all the things I felt like I could have done and never actually processing those things. And so what you're talking about here, I think, is one of those key points that maybe we think that we're good at it, but we're really not. Because instead of being gracious in defeat, then what we're doing is just being silent about all of the consternation that we have, when that's really not gracious at all. What it is an internalization and a lack of like ability to process. So to that end, when you're talking about the SEALs in particular, right? You know, if two SEALs are on a run, it's automatically a competition. You say there's a part of us that when we lose at something, it's easy for us to, have the kid reaction of like throwing a fit, that I lost, right? But the other side of it is, that kind of like stoic reaction. How do you find the balance between the emotional connection that you had to whatever competition you were in, no matter what the level is, and then being able to use that as a good point of like honest assessment and figuring out like, hey, is this like, we look at first, desires versus capabilities. Is this something I was even capable of? And the second being like, hey, what were my training things like? What mistakes did I made? How do you break that down in order to process that stuff?
Ask your initial question one more time for me. I was
Yeah.
listening to all that, and I just want to hear you say it because I want to make sure I answer this properly.
Yeah. So my questions tend to be like 5 minutes long. So let me roll back.
No, no,
No,
no,
the
no, no. It was good. I just want to make sure I have it.
yeah. So when you lose, how do
Yeah.
you find the balance of gracious loser and beating yourself up over it? So whether that beating yourself up is,
Yeah. So,
yeah, whatever that
so
looks like.
yeah. So the natural tendencies of most people, they don't enjoy losing. They don't.
Yeah.
And and when you see when kids lose, some of them will throw tempers, and some of them will just be like, "All right, that sucks," and they'll go on. I personally think this is the whole you're a product of your environment.
Okay.
So if the people around you, when they lose their temper, they scream, they yell, they cry, they throw a fit, they make excuses, and that's what you see from the majority of the people around you when you're growing up. When you get put in a situation where you lose, what are you probably going to do?
Repeat those behaviors.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because that is what has been taught to you. Going back to the principle that leadership is a skill set, all of these things are skill sets. These are things that are taught to us. Now, you have other kids where when they lose, they don't do that. Why is that? Is that because they're a better kid? Is that because they have a different, genetic makeup that allows them to just be calm and detached and emotionless and accept defeat? Or do you think maybe they have also been taught, hey, when you lose, which you're going to in life, you need to control your emotions? Because when you can control your emotions, that allows you to make good decisions. That allows you not to act like an idiot. Hey, watch this video of this person losing their temper and throwing a fit. Is that somebody that you want to be like? Hey, people that can't control their emotions and their temper tend to not be very successful in life. They tend to damage relationships with friends and families and coworkers and business deals. Is that something that you would like to also do when you get older? So, I mean, these are this might seem extreme what I'm saying, but the principle is it's a taught thing. I think it's taught because we emulate the people around us. It's just something that we do. And and until we have an environment where somebody is telling us these things, either way, like I don't think people naturally just can be throwing fits. I think it's a little bit of like you're going to be kind of in between not knowing what to do, but these are all skill sets. These are skill sets, legitimate. These are skill sets. And when I remember when Jocko pulled me aside and we were running trade it together, and I was just like screaming at these guys that had made some mistakes that were going through training. I mean, I'm talking like just screaming, losing my cool from the catwalks. And I kind of felt like, yeah, man, I'll let those guys have it, because they had made some mistakes, and I clearly lost my temper, and I was just going off on these guys. And Jocko pulls me aside and he says, hey, man, when you lose your temper, it's a sign of weakness because it means that you're allowing somebody else's actions or words or the situation that you're in to dictate how you react. That means that you're not in control. And he goes, I know you're not a weak person. So maybe we don't do that. And so it was a very casual comment that he told me, but he was teaching me, hey, you need to detach from your emotions. You don't need to be losing your temper. And Cora is a great example of this. My daughter Cora, I have twin daughters, Nola and Cora. If you haven't listened to their episode on the podcast, you 100% should go back and listen to
Yep,
it.
episode 19.
Yeah, it's a great episode. We actually recorded it on their birthday, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But Cora hates to lose like me. And she had a jiu-jitsu tournament recently. And leading up to the tournament, she was pretty nervous. And she kept saying, like, I don't want to lose, Dad. I don't want to get hurt. And I'm like, well, you're not going to get hurt. And she goes, but what if I lose? And I told her, I don't care. As long as you go out there and you have good sportsmanship and you act professional and you try as hard as you can, I don't care if you win or lose. Like you're 12 years old doing a jiu-jitsu tournament. I want you to go out there and have fun, baby. I'm proud of all the hard work that you put into it, training 2 to 3, sometimes 4 hours a day in jiu-jitsu, 3 to 4 times a week. Her game improved. And the first 2 matches that she had were against the 2 top ranked girls in her age and bracket and weight. And she lost both of those matches. But you know what? They barely beat her. This is her first actual jujitsu competition, first ever actual big, outside of like some in-house ones that Travis Luter did back in the day, which were phenomenal. But the girls were like 7 or 8 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And now she's 12. That's a game changer, right? These other girls have been competing regularly, and they barely beat her, like barely. And these girls were so sweet, and they came up afterwards and they're talking to myself and Cora. And I remember the first girl that beat her ended up going on and winning the whole thing. She goes, man, your daughter was so strong. She's like, I was nervous because I couldn't do anything. She goes, I got lucky at the very end, was able to pass and hold it, and that's the only reason why I won. And I'm like, heck yeah, man. But I was, afterwards I told Cora, I said, hey, I know you might be frustrated with me for saying this, but I want you to know that I'm actually happy those were your first 2 matches when it comes to competing, because you're not going to go against that level again unless it's against those girls. And those girls had a very hard time and they barely beat you. Now, it doesn't take away from those girls. They were good. They were better than you. They beat you. And it was awesome. Like I literally had tears running down my face, like just little tears streaming down as Cora goes, yeah, those girls were really good. And I'm super proud of them. And I'm really happy in my performance. And for her afterwards, smiling and hugging these girls and coming and giving me a hug and a kiss and just having a positive attitude, that was a skill set that we had to teach her through coaching and talking through the scenarios. Like, hey, if you win, cool. If you lose, cool. It's how you conduct yourself that matters. Now, as a father, did I want my daughter to go win? 100%. I visualized her standing on that podium with the gold medal. I did many times. And a lot of people thought she was just going to go out there and you just wreck these girls. And she did a very good job, but she lost because the other girls were better. And she's been gracious in that defeat. But I'll tell you what, she's been training hard. I thought she was training hard before. Oh, man. I mean, she's like meal prepping. She's lifting weights. she's doing like privates and training jiu-jitsu. I mean, bro, I'm telling you, man, I'm like, she might be a problem for me soon, you know? And it's just, it's cool to see her attitude. And that's because the attitude was guided and coached upon her by myself, Amanda, Formiga, Victoria, and other, coaches and competitors at the gym. So this is a skill set that you can learn and be taught in regards to, hey, detaching from your emotions, learning from your defeats, learning from your victories. For us in the SEAL teams, and I know we've talked about this a lot, we would debrief everything. I just talked about it as we were opening this up. We would debrief and talk through everything to figure out, hey, what's working and what's not working. And that's something as humans we have to be disciplined to actually do for ourselves. And I think the more we do that, Lucas, the more self-aware we become of our shortcomings and our shortfalls, and that allows us to have that growth, that allows us to establish detachment into our core nature of who we are, because that's not normal for a lot of people. But as you and I have talked about many times, one of the things that we say and we teach at Echelon Front is detachment is a superpower. And that's why when I can detach from my emotions, it allows me to do the things that you and I are talking about.
The former Dallas Cowboys quarterback Troy Aikman talks a lot about his what he feels like was his best game, and it was a loss to the San Francisco 49ers. So in the 1995 championship game, Dallas went down 21-0 in the first quarter, and he had to fight his way back. Now the Cowboys end up losing that game 28-38. The next year they come and he has a stellar performance. They win the Super Bowl, and this was like right in the middle of their 3 Super Bowls in 4 years run. But that loss is what he says was his best game of all time. I was recently
Dude, that's
reading.
right there, man.
Yeah, it's incredible, right? And I was recently reading a book by Harry Crosby, who is featured in Masters of the Air. Is one of the guys who was a navigator for the D-Day missions. He was the lead navigator for the Bloody 100, the B-17 fighters during World War II. And he was saying that his dad told him that you need to win 85% of the time and lose 15% of the time in anything that you're doing, because it shows that you're still making movement forward. But you do 90% of your learning from the 15% that you lose, because that 15% of the time where you're losing, that is where you figure out, what your shortcomings are, where you can be better, those kinds of things. So we have a lot of examples about how people can take pride in a losing performance, how they can learn from a losing performance. I think one of the things that people struggle with is not just learning from losing, but how to be a gracious winner. And I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with being a gracious winner is because, just like Cora, you get all of this time and effort and energy that's put into getting better and better. And you may, be at a place where, it takes you years to reach a podium. And when you get to that point, and we've seen not just in athletics, but in politics and all kinds of arenas, when somebody becomes an ungracious winner, right? When they
Yeah.
become like a gloater whenever they win, like it turns people off. And the very people who were like supporting them yesterday might be like, dude, I don't like the way that you won, right? So
Yep.
how can we be gracious in victory if we've already learned how to be gracious in defeat?
You apply the same principles. It's literally, I think, the exact same thing. It's something that is taught, whether you teach it yourself by being self-aware, doing assessments, reflections, watching other people, reading books, listening to this podcast, listening to Jocko's podcast. Like, you can teach it yourself, and or it can be taught to you by good friends, mentors, coaches, parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, a business coach that you hired, working with us at Echelon Front, like whatever, like it can be taught to you. And I remember, one of my best friends, Jake Underwood, him and his brother, Zach Underwood, Andy Urich, Joe Pass, Teddy Holder. These guys were my MMA coaches when I first got out of this. I was in the military, actually, still. I was getting ready to transition out. I started training MMA in South Haven, Mississippi, was training under these guys. And um, I remember before, like really right before my very first MMA fight, Jake is talking to all of the fighters, and he says, "Hey, act like you've won before when you go out there." He goes, even if it's your first win, act like you've won before. Be professional. Don't be throwing your mouth guard into the crowd like anybody cares about your stupid mouth guard. You're an amateur fighter. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about your gloves. Nobody cares that you won. And nobody's going to care that you lose. Nobody cares either way. Just go out there, be professional, represent the gym, represent your, you know what I mean? He's talking about like that we needed to represent all these people properly. And for me, this was literally this month that I was had this fight. It was a year after Extortion 17 had happened. And the helicopter crash in Afghanistan in
Okay.
August of 2011. So my MMA fight was in August of 2012. And so I had this fight. It was a year later. It was also to the date of a year after when my grandfather passed away, which was on the same day that we buried Derek Benson, who was my roommate, one of my best friends in the SEAL teams, who was killed on that helicopter crash. And so for me, it was a reminder like I got to represent my boys properly. I got to represent the SEAL teams properly, and go out there, and whether I won or lost, I needed to have, dignity and respect and conduct myself in a professional manner. I was representing the SEAL teams, bro. I was representing my fallen teammates, my dead roommate and my best friend, like I needed to represent these guys properly. I needed to represent my family that was there in attendance. I needed to represent my wife and my kids that were there. I mean, for me, it was easy to remain humble in defeat, and I won that fight. And I remember afterwards, there's other guys that win. They're like, yeah, they're like flexing at the crowd, like doing that symbol, like,
Right.
And I just remember I won, and they raised my hand, and I was like, they raised my hand, and I looked up, and I pointed up towards heaven to give God glory, and that was it. Like that was what I did, and that's what I've done after every single fight that I've won, and every the one MMA fight and the jiu-jitsu match that I lost. When I lost, I just all right, looked forward, looked over at my opponent, you know, clapped for them because they beat me fair and square, and back to the drawing board. So the humility and victory is something that's also taught to us. You you have to be intentional about controlling your emotions and remaining humble in victory because it can quickly change. Life can quickly humble you. That's why I have this too shall pass on tattooed on my wrist, because it's a very simple reminder that when life is bad, keep your head up because it can change. But when life is really good, remain humble because it can change in an instant. And I've been on the receiving end of both of those things where, man, all of a sudden, hey, man, life is like just seems unfair and not going well, and boom, things could change. And then I've been in situations where, man, life was crazy, it was awesome, everything was great, and boom, next day, night and day difference. You know, for me, have been in the SEAL teams and have been in combat. Man, I have that advantage when it comes to remaining humble in victory and defeat because I've experienced both. And it's also something that was taught to us in the SEAL teams. But I always go back. I always think about Jake Underwood. And I was just texting with him today. His son is a freaking stud. I'm like, oh, big shocker. Your son is a stud, right? Jake is super intelligent, was a phenomenal MMA fighter, coach, jiu-jitsu practitioner. And, it's just crazy. And it's just, and I'm going to read a text message to you to reiterate what I've been talking about in regards to these things are taught. And so I was texting with Jake, and this is what he said. He goes, I hope you don't get tired of hearing my Haddon stories. That's his son. But I feel like it will make you feel better about our future. Haddon hates losing, and his team lost their first game last week, made them 7-1. He was crying. Everyone was trying to make him feel better. I was just proud he hated losing as bad as I do. When we were on the way home, I asked him what he planned to do about it. He said, get better. He didn't say anything else. When we got home, he told me he wanted me to take him to get lessons at the Gatorade Field House. I called and told him they were $60 a lesson. I was going to pay for it. While I was gone with work, the kid went and found someone to let him mow and weed and weed eat and edge their 1 acre yard for $120 to pay for his lesson. This kid is unreal. I said, holy crap, that's incredible, bro. And he sent me videos of his son. Just, dude, okay, I'm going to open this up and show it to you. His kid's not a teenager, man. His kid's not a teenager, and he's out there doing this on his own. The handle to the lawnmower is above his head.
Oh man.
And he goes, if I had this work ethic, if I had his ethic, I would have dethroned GSP. LOL. Hope he decides to go and wrestle. I said, well, he gets it from you. I'm so proud of him. And then I said, hey, man, what's your Venmo? I'm going to match some of that money he earned for lessons as a gift. Because, man, hearing that, I'm like, bro, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, dude, that is like, and I'm not going to lie, that gives me hope about the future generation because, you hear stories about, Isaac's kids and the work ethics they have, and Josh Strasburger's kids and Stephen Little's kids, and, Cora and Nola and Aiden. And I'm like, and then I hear this, I'm like, you know what? We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And it's just awesome.
Oh, dude. Yeah, that's a little guy out there pushing that mower.
Doing all of that.
That's wow. That's impressive, man.
Dude, he did that on his own. Now, Jake says he did that on his own. But where do you think he learned that from?
He's got to get it from home.
100% his parents.
Yeah.
100% Jake and Kathleen, his parents, taught him that. 100% from being around his uncle Zach, who is it still, in his 40s, an MMA coach, and and helping get these young fighters up to speed and going in there and training and sparring with these guys. Andy Urick, who's same thing, doing all these things, that most people don't train that hard with their fighters. He's seeing that example in his life. And this kid knew, hey, if I go out there and I work hard, I can earn some money to make me better so I don't lose. I don't know about you, man. That fires me up. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Not losing, I think, is the goal of most of us. Like, I don't know that there's that everybody is like trying to always be like the number one spot, but I do think everybody is striving to not lose. And as weird as that may sound, like that's a big thing too whenever we talk about, because one of the big things that you talk about is complacency, right? When we get in a pattern of not losing, I think is when we get complacent, right? Like it's the disease of victory, but victory doesn't always mean a podium spot. Victory may just mean like not losing for some of us. So the quote that you used from Extreme Ownership was like, be competitive, but a gracious loser. How do we keep a competitive edge when we are used to not losing?
If you're used to not losing, you're in the wrong place.
Okay.
If you're not used, okay, hold on. I want to make sure I heard what you said. You said, how can we maintain a competitive edge if we're not used to losing? Meaning we're just winning all the time?
Yeah, either we're winning all the time or we're just happy with being in the middle, and being comfortable.
If you're happy with being in the middle, dude, that's a bad mindset to have, right? You just need to get rid of that. That's complacency. It's going to creep in. It's going to ruin your life. Maybe not initially, but long term, it's going to. Study people that have had things fall apart, and that's where they were at. Just, hey, I'm okay with surviving. No, you're not. Nobody's okay with surviving. It's a lie. It's a lie that we tell ourselves. This goes back to discipline is rooted in the truth that we tell ourselves. Complacency is rooted in the lies that we believe.
Okay.
Nobody likes being middle of the pack. Nobody does.
I
That's a lie.
I believe that.
Like, do you want to be an average pastor?
No.
Do you want to be an average Christian? Do you want to be an average husband? Do you want to be an average father? Do you want to be an average friend?
I would prefer not.
Exactly. No,
Yeah.
nobody
Right.
wants to be average in any aspect of their life. It's a BS lie that we tell ourselves to justify the fact that we know we've allowed us to get complacent. It's a lie. Just like Jake's son isn't happy that they were 7-1.
Yeah.
He's a kid. He's a kid and he knows being average sucks. We shouldn't strive to be average. We should strive to be great. God has given us gifts and abilities to be great. That's what we need to strive for. And so if you're in an environment where you're always winning, then you're in the wrong place. If you're at a gym that you're always winning, you're in the wrong gym. You're not pushing yourself. In the SEAL teams, we always had the ability to push the limits and or create scenarios that would dictate a loss no matter what. And we were able to do that because we would get creative and we knew that every single person and or team has limitations. I remember I was I was talking about training for jiu-jitsu and a competition and something with Justin Blythe that works with us at Echelon Front. And he said you should be so exhausted that every white belt should be able to submit you. And I jokingly said, I'll never let that happen. Like I was totally joking.
Right.
And his response, and he knew I was joking, but his response, because he's a good coach, he's a good friend, was, well, then you're not training hard enough. He goes, you should push yourself to where you're so physically exhausted that every white belt in the gym should be able to beat you. That's when you know you've trained hard enough. And I love that mindset because that forces you to put yourself in a situation that you are being completely humbled. You have to show humility and you have to keep digging because average people will never put themselves there. And we have to do that. We have to do it. And you also have to surround yourself with good coaches and good friends and good leaders that are going to push you, that they're going to call the BS flag when they know that you're lying. When you're trying to find the easy way out, they're going to be like, no, no, no. Like, actually, no, that's not what you're going to do because that's not who you are. You're not a quitter. You don't quit. You're not going to quit on your family. You're not going to quit on your kids. You're going to stay in the fight. You're going to fight for them because that's the right thing to do. Like, we need people like that in our lives. Don't take the easy way out.
But the easy way out is so easy.
I know.
Yeah, right. Like yeah,
Weird.
that's one of the things about the easy way out that I think is so appealing. And one of the reasons that part of the dichotomies that we create in leadership is like maintaining that competitive edge.
Yep.
How do you maintain a competitive edge? Because like maintaining the competitive edge and being a gracious loser has a lot of different applications, right? One of those applications is obviously in, like a foot race or something. If you're doing that with your other guys that are in the SEALs, right? If Jocko and Andrew Paul set off on a 20-mile run right now, right? Andrew Paul is likely to win because he's training in these 40, 50, 60-mile runs that he's
Yeah.
doing. Although it's like, even though Jocko's his boss, like I think in those situations, it's easy to be a gracious loser of like, you know what? Jocko's been training jiu-jitsu all day. Andrew's been training for these like ultra marathons. And so if he loses on a 20-mile run, like, hey, you know what? Great job. It seems more difficult when that becomes something that enters into the boardroom. Because if we're making a decision within the company and I feel like I have the best plan for our company and somebody else comes up with a plan, maybe it's not a better plan, but maybe it's the plan that more people like, right? And so I feel like I'm losing or, something like that comes up. Like, how do we manage competitiveness and being gracious as losers in the workplace? because I think
So
it's got some similar principles, but it becomes a little bit more personal because it's not like our pride on the line as much as it is like our pride plus our livelihoods.
yeah, so the way I interpreted what you just said and the question that you asked brings me back to decentralized command. And if you think of that from a leadership aspect of the fourth law of combat that we teach at Echelon Front, decentralized command, my goal is to empower the people around me. So that means I don't have to be right. It doesn't have to be my plan. I want my people to come up with good plans. I actually want my team to be smarter than me, to have better ideas and better plans than me. I was talking with a very, very successful business owner a few weeks ago, and he said, I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. If I'm the smartest person, that's a problem. I just want to be the person that brings the room together. And I look at that from a leadership aspect is I don't need to be right. I don't have to be right. I want my team to be right. I want Cody to have better ideas and plans than I do, which by the way, he usually does because he's awesome at what he does. He's very smart, he's intelligent. He practices what we preach. He emulates that in every aspect of your life. So does Josh. So does Justin. So does Danny. So does Carlos. So do all the instructors at Echelon Front. So if I'm not the one with the plan, if I'm not the one that's right, I'm okay with that. It comes down to having humility and saying, hey, you know what? Hey, Lucas, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Your plan was better. I should have stuck with your plan. And hey, you know what? Moving forward, I'm going to let you run with these plans within these lanes, this realm. Hey, man, I want you to take lead on this. Is that something that you're comfortable with? Because I trust you. You have good ideas. And if we would have just stuck with your idea originally, we wouldn't have had this problem. So again, I'm sorry. This is my fault. I want you to take lead on this moving forward. Because if I have somebody on my team who's capable and competent and comes up with good ideas and plans, they're not exactly the way I would do it, but it still gets the job done. Ultimately, who cares? And ultimately, that allows me as a leader to be strategic and have good vision and alignment with my leadership and then maintain alignment with my team. That's what I'm striving for. Now, do I do that all the time? No. Do do really great leaders do it all the time? No, they struggle with it once in a while, but they're able to recognize it and go back to that empowerment and driving ownership down to their people. That's my goal. That's what I want to be doing.
So with decentralized command, it's easy to see how if we're leading from the top down, that's an easy place for us to look at and say, okay, this person is the one that I put in charge of this. I need to go with their plan and make that work. We've talked about the kind of the percentage, whether it was a Q&A or a previous episode where we talked about how, if their plan is 80% right, like let's go with their plan, right? If it's 70%,
That's
like
exactly what I'm talking about. Yes.
let's coach them up. What if it's peers? Because now it's not decentralized command. What if it's two people in the same organization? They're both presenting, a plan to the boss. How am I balancing my competitive nature with wanting my plan to be picked, wanting to move up in my company, wanting to win with, okay, now I've lost. Now how do I be a gracious loser and a good teammate? Because I think that those things are often in opposition to one another. Right? When we've got competing proposals or those types of things, how do we be gracious losers and then also good teammates?
Well, so they beat you out on the competition in business because they were better than you, correct?
The majority of the
Is,
time. Right. Yeah. I'll say the
no, I'm
majority of the
saying
time that
this is
happens.
what we're
Right.
assuming it's off of, not
Right.
because of favoritism
Right.
or nepotism or any of the tisms that are involved
Right.
with,
Yeah.
getting favors from people. Like, okay, like that's not what we're talking about. We're talking
Yes.
about
They
I
had the
present
better
a plan,
plan.
JP presents a plan, Lucas presents a plan. The leadership says, hey, you know what? Lucas, we like your plan. We think it's better. It's more well rounded. It's what we need. We're going to go with your plan. I, as a human and as a leader, and I'm saying leader in quotations
Right.
because, again, We're not talking about a lead, like a title type of thing, but just a human in the organization. All right.
Right.
As a good person, I need to have humility. They picked your plan because it's better. So I'm going to go back to what I opened it up with. I'm going to build a good relationship with you. I'm going to say, hey man, congratulations on that bid. That's awesome. And if I have a good relationship with you, I might have the ability to learn from you. And then if I'm smart, I'll maintain a good relationship with my leadership and I'll go to my leadership and say, hey, I understand that Lucas's plan was better than mine. No doubt about that. That's why you guys picked it. Hey, just for my personal growth within this organization, can you give me some feedback as to why you didn't pick my plan and what would I have needed to change or do with my plan to make it better? What made Lucas's better than mine? Because I just want to learn and see what I need to be doing. That's hard to do
Yeah, man.
because that requires a submission of your ego. This is all rooted back in our ego, brother. And I know you know these things, and that's why you're asking these questions so we can have these conversations. This is an ego problem. And if I can subordinate my ego and say, hey, that sucks. Like, hey, I'm not happy that they didn't pick my plan. I lost the competition. But at the end of the day, hey, one team, one fight. And if Lucas's plan is better and it helps the organization, then I'm going to get on board and I'm going to support that. We had that same type of competition in Task Unit Bruiser. Jocko cultivated that culture within Task Unit Bruiser between Leif and Seth. And yes, they were in competition 100% of the time, but they also were never going to sabotage the relationship or sabotage Task Unit Bruiser for one of them to be better than the other. It was, man, I'm telling you, this is a culture thing. And that's why we say culture is the ultimate form of decentralized command. Because when that's your culture, then people know what to do. They know what to do. They know what to say. They know how to act. They know what to say no to. They don't let their ego get in the way because of the culture that's driving these things. This is, bro, these things are a lot harder than they sound. These things seem simple, but they're not easy. Simple, not easy. I love Leif Babin talks about that all the time. Simple, not easy.
Yep.
And so these are things that we have to recognize.
I love your Zoom emoji that popped up whenever you just gave me that thumbs up. Did you see that?
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that could happen.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
apologize.
No. I think it's awesome.
So that's why you should be watching on YouTube.
So you can
Check
see
that out.
JP's emojis. Like do a
Check this out too.
yeah. I don't no emoji for that. Nothing for the flex. Sorry.
Dang it.
I know, right? Should just change you to a picture of Lou Ferrigno and just go green as soon as you flex. That would be awesome. So you do mention that okay, these things are simple but not easy. And most things in life, I think that are worth doing end up in that category, right? One of the chefs that I follow, he's a French chef named Chef Jean Pierre, and he's got a huge YouTube following. And this is where like a lot of the stuff that I'm doing at home is coming from. And this is one of the things that he constantly says is he's like, cooking is simple, but it's not easy because you got to pay a lot of attention to the little detail things. Subordinating our ego seems like a little detail thing. Being a gracious loser seems like a little detail thing. They're simple concepts, but there's a lot of stuff that's lost in the details. One of the pieces of feedback that we get a lot on the podcast is extreme ownership sounds great, but it only works in a perfect world. Because it only works when the boss actually picks the other guy because he's better, not because of all the tisms. It only works when other people are willing to also take ownership, not just me taking ownership. It only works when, we're all willing to subordinate our egos. It only works when everybody is on one team, one fight. You talk about creating a culture. Well, creating a culture is something that we know works. It's stuff that every business person out there is talking about. How do you create, first off, does extreme ownership only work in a perfect organization or in a perfect world?
No,
Okay, cool. Thanks.
because I don't need everybody to be doing it for it to work and for it to win. It's about me. This is not about anybody else. I don't take ownership in hopes that Lucas takes ownership. I take ownership because it's the right thing to do. And I also don't play the reverse psychology BS card that people will play of being like, well, hey, I know that, you're going to take ownership over this. So, but no, what are you doing? You're actually trying to manipulate people now.
Mm-hmm.
No, I take ownership over my mistakes. It's on me, 100% on me. This is not about my boss taking ownership or my wife taking ownership or my teammates taking ownership or my business partners taking ownership. I know I take ownership because it's the right thing to do because I was a contributing factor to it. 100%. If I'm involved, I was a contributing factor.
Yeah.
I'm the common denominator. And that culture can spread. And now, if I have a handful of people that are now taking ownership in an organization, guess what? We win. My buddy Jake, his son, like, if he's able to get a few of his other teammates on board with working hard and training and putting in the extra work, bro, that's crazy. And then it grows and it grows and it grows. And then, you know, his son's coach ends up, reading Extreme Ownership or listening to Jocko's podcast or something like that. And, he's like, hey, you know what, man, if I could start instilling, these extreme ownership principles into these kids at a young age, yeah, hey, they're probably going to win more games. But you know what's the ultimate win is raising young men and women that understand that taking ownership is an important quality. And then and that's what we're talking about. It's that ripple effect of when you take ownership and you show people the value of taking ownership, then they say, okay, cool, maybe that's something I should do. But you don't need everybody. Now, Ben, how cool would that be if everybody was taking ownership and fighting to take ownership? It probably sounds like you work at Echelon Front
Yeah.
because
I was gonna
that's
say,
what
yeah.
we do, bro. It's funny. I was talking with Leif earlier today, and he's like, "Hey, man, I would hope like if ever this was happening with me, you'd give me that feedback because I love you, brother, and I trust you, and I care about you." And I'm like, "Well, I think the likelihood of me having to give you that feedback, Leif, is zero. But if there was ever that time where I needed to pull you aside and be like, hey, man, you're violating these principles, I would." Because I care about you, I love you, and I want us to win. And I was joking, but I was kind of serious. I said, the feedback I do have that, man, something I could really use help with is, hey, I would really appreciate like, you to stop taking ownership over my mistakes and just give me some coaching, give me some guidance, and just let me work through the problems I've created. And he started laughing because, it's just that's counterintuitive to what we do. I,
Right.
I hadn't created any problems or mistakes. We were just talking about these things. But in the past, when I'd done something wrong, I was like, dang, and I'm like taking ownership, and I'm just super remorseful of like this mistake that I had made, and I'm trying to, work through it. And Leif's sitting there like legitimately taking ownership over my mistake, and I remember getting actually irritated. I'm like, hey, I know what you're doing. Stop, like stop, just just be pissed off at me, fire me, whatever. And he goes, cool, you're fired. Now you're rehired. Okay, this is what we got to do, And it's just like, bro, that's the best environment that you can be a part of.
Yeah.
And, it starts with a handful of people. And here's the thing, it's the culture of what we do at Echelon Front. I was texting with Justin Blythe earlier, and we had an issue with enterprise rental cars, which I prefer that we'd never use them again based off of the last couple of incidents that we've had with them. And I was talking to him yesterday, and he's like, "Hey, man, I don't know like who I should talk to about this. I'm just giving you a heads up." He wasn't able to talk to Cody because Cody was at a workshop, and I had called him anyways to talk to him. And he goes, "Hey, man, from last week I returned the rental car, and I just got a phone call earlier today from them saying that they were wondering where the car was at. And I told them that I returned the car. I returned it at the after hours, right in front of it. I put my keys in the drop box, and they were trying to tell me that the car hadn't been returned. He goes, I don't know what to do. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, let me I'm supposed to talk with Jamie in a few minutes. Like I'll ask Jamie, and then maybe we'll talk to the legal team. I don't know. And so, anyways, we're talking, and then he ends up getting an update, and he tells me that they were like, "Hey, so we found the vehicle and the car and the keys, but we're gonna have to charge you for every day up until today because we didn't have it, we didn't know where it's at, and we lost revenue." And he goes, "No, that's theft." He goes, "You guys aren't gonna like you're not gonna steal money from our company. I returned it on time. I put the keys in the drop box where they told me to put it." And he goes, I literally parked the vehicle in front of the building. Like how, like there's no way that you couldn't find this vehicle. And unfortunately, like this rental company and another one has tried to do this to us before because they're like, oh, this is a corporate account. Guess what most corporate accounts will do? Just pay it. Like no dispute, just pay it. And and Justin's like, bro, that's stealing. They're stealing from Echelon Front. And he was like fired up. It was like as if you took money from his mom, bro. He was like, I was well, I was like, I don't know. I was like, we might not get, I'm thinking like we probably might not get legal involved because it's like a $400 charge. And for us to get legal involved, it doesn't make sense for us to pay those legal fees for that. And
Right.
then I end up talking to Jamie and she says the same thing. And so then I get an update from Justin today. He goes, all is good with Enterprise, got the charges reversed. He goes, this stuff works. And so what he did is he used the principles that we teach to build a relationship, to properly communicate, and to solve the problem. This stuff works. And it's cool to see it in action. And so that was a cool little example of, the team getting after it and doing the right thing. It was pretty cool. I'm super proud of Justin for sure
Yeah.
because I know like he's protective of Echelon Front, and he could have handled it differently. He could have been rude. He could have been like aggressive and rude towards them, which I think most people would if they're like, no, 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 you're not going to steal money from me. You're not, But instead, he was like, I detached from my emotions. I use the principles that we teach. Problem solved.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say, that this stuff works, right? Because that's kind of one of the lines from a lot of the guys at the muster is the hey, this stuff works, and then you see that's also I think one of the podcasts that EF runs is that this stuff
Yeah,
works podcast, and
yeah. Leif does that podcast.
yeah,
This stuff works where he interviews different people that have implemented extreme ownership into different areas of their life and explain like, hey, this is how it worked. This is what I did. Here's the impact. So yeah, it works.
So when you get into a situation like you were in with Leif, where you guys are becoming competitive about who takes ownership, right? It seems like the person that wins in that scenario is also the loser because they're the one that is, that like is that it's at fault for them. So how do you
So
in that situation be the gracious loser when in some ways you've kind of won because somebody else is now taking the heat for whatever went wrong?
you're basing the term loser off of what most people think losing is. And in reality, if I'm taking ownership over something that's happened within my team, am I actually losing? Big picture, no, because I'm building a relationship, I'm building trust with my team, I'm gaining influence with the people around me. And when we're in those situations where we have this back and forth ownership battle where we're going back and forth, and Leif's like, "Hey man, like if I would have been more aware of this, it wouldn't have been an issue." And I'm like, "Well, Leif, if I would have communicated these things to you sooner, and I would have had better contact with X, Y, and Z, and we're going back and forth. There does come a point where I'll just be like, hey, boss, I appreciate you taking ownership. I really do. Hey, what I'm going to do moving forward to ensure this doesn't happen is this." And then Leif comes back and says, cool, Ray, you know what, JP, appreciate that. What I'm going to do from my end is this. And then now we have a mutual agreement on the solutions that we're creating and that we're going to do together to work together to win, to move forward. It's never a, you know, hey, no, hey, Leif, that's my fault. And then, nothing goes from there. And then I'm like, dude, this sucks, man. Like, what the heck, man? He, I'm taking ownership. Why didn't he take ownership? Again, we don't take ownership in hopes that other people are going to take ownership. I don't take ownership and view it as like I'm coming out on the bottom and I'm losing. No, I take ownership because it's the right thing to do. It's me taking the moral high ground, subordinating my ego, and recognizing it is my fault. Because if someone on my team makes a mistake, if Lucas, you work for me and we're in the SEAL teams and you make a mistake, it's my fault because you're my new guy. You're my teammate. Who trained you? Who qualifies you? Who checked your training? You're right. Like there's 1,000 different ways I can pull it back to me. And I do this because I genuinely feel the responsibility of providing solutions to those problems, of providing solutions to the problems that you have that you're working through. I feel responsible to train you, to coach you, to mentor you, to get you up to speed. That's my responsibility. You're on my team, you're my responsibility. You impact my world, it's my responsibility. And it's a culture and a mindset. And that's what drives us to win. Going back to the competitive nature, I do this because I want to win. I want you to win. And if you're on my team and you're not performing, I'm losing. So, you know what? I'm going to take ownership over your shortcomings and get you up to speed so that you can go out there and you can dominate and we can win together. That's what I focus on. That's what I care about.
When you put it like that, it does seem a little bit more appealing.
Yeah. Yeah. This is this. And you and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
And I love that you're asking these questions because we've gotten these questions from people
Mm-hmm.
privately and, kind of drive us to go this way. Bro, it's a mindset shift. That's what it is. It's a mindset shift. I was talking earlier in that training, um, and someone was like, "Well, what about this?" I'm like, "I don't care." And they're like, "What do you mean you don't care?" I said, "I don't care. I'm not going to let it bother me. Like I give up my right to be right. Like I don't. Hey, if you got a better idea, cool. Like I'm going to support you. Like you want to do it your way, cool. You know what I mean? As long as it's not unethical, as long as it's the right thing, you know what I mean? Like as long as I'm not violating these things, like it doesn't have to be my idea.
Mm.
People are so consumed and wrapped up in the lies that we've told ourselves that, hey man, like you got to go to bat for yourself. It's you versus everybody else. No, it's you and the team. It's you and your family. It's you and your friends and you know what I mean? That's what I'm focused on is building really good relationships. And when I say that's what I'm focused on, like that's what I'm focused on today and moving forward. That's what I've been trying to be focused on. The last 7.5 years that I've been at Echelon Front, and the year and a half prior to that I had read Extreme Ownership, and I was trying to restore my marriage and get my family back together and get my finances back together. These are the things that I'm focused on. I've experienced really good things in life, and I've experienced really bad things in life. And ultimately, I recognize that like if I control my attitude, my work ethic, and my integrity, my discipline, guess what? I'm gonna win. And what winning looks like is different from everybody else. Like that's the thing. We have to understand and we have to establish what does winning actually look like for you. And then we put in the work. You have to put in the thought and then you have to put in the work. Without, it's this whole belief principle. Like, hey, you have to believe in the mission. And if I believe in the mission and I understand the mission, guess what? It drives me to do the right things. But I also have to go out there and put in the work. And that's what I'm driven to do because I like to win.
I love it, dude.
Yeah.
So my takeaways: be competitive, but be a gracious loser. Do the difficult things that are simple to say, and then leading in a way that I allow myself to revel in the victories of the people around me more than my own. Seems like a wonderful way to lead, dude. That's awesome. And it doesn't have to happen in a perfect world. I can be the one that starts the culture. And I think that's one of the things that our listeners can take a hold of the most is that I can be the one that begins this culture. Like it
Yep.
doesn't have to happen in a vacuum or a perfect world like some people think. Like
Oh
that
yeah.
it starts with you.
100%. It always starts with you. So, man, that's good.
Not bad for our first Zoom episode, huh?
Let's go, bro. Let's go. So, hey, before we wrap it up, I have some actual closing thoughts that I also want to add to it at the very end,
Yeah, yeah.
that tie into what we're talking about. But in about 16, 17 days from when you listen to this, when it comes out on Friday, on June 11th, I'm going to be doing a full day Echelon Front leadership workshop here in the Dallas Fort Worth area. It's going to be open to individual ticket sales. So you can come solo, come with a small team, come with a large team. It's awesome. My buddy Ian Hamilton, that I've talked to you about before, he's going to be coming to that training. And one of his buddies that I met at a Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu event 2 months ago, his buddy just signed up and bought a ticket. He sent me the screenshot.
That's
So it's
awesome.
awesome. Like they're gonna be driving up from Stevensville, Texas, bro, to come to the event. And so we just want to thank Flower Mound PD for helping out with that. Again, you can come as an individual, small group, large group. It is certified for our first responders here in Texas. You can go to the show notes anywhere that this podcast is being hosted. I will also be um, adding it to my Instagram profile as well. But hey, again, I just want to thank you guys for all the support you guys give us by listening, sharing, subscribing, commenting on YouTube and all the different platforms. Has been awesome. Hey, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel so you can be notified when our YouTube exclusive episodes come out. If you want to follow us on social media, I am at JP Dinnell. That's two N's, two L's. Lucas is at Lucas Pinkard. That's Lucaspinkard. Make sure you guys are following at Echelon Front. Check out what we have going on. Go to echelonfront.com. Click on events. See all the events that we have coming out. I think FTX 014 in September just sold out. We
Wow.
might be opening up a second one the following week or another time, or it might be a month or two later, but that sold out. We have the council. We have a few spots left open for the council. That's going to be the last week of June. The council, I believe 4 is sold out, and we opened up council 5. It's going to be incredible. Go to echelonfront.com, click on events, check that out. We have the muster coming up, battlefield reviews. If you want us to come work with your company, we have an LDAP program. We have FTXs. We do keynotes. We do workshops. We do it all. The LDAP programs that we have at Echelon Front is absolutely incredible because it allows us to have a long-term relationship with you and your company for growth and expansion. And within that, we do workshops, we do coaching, we do FTXs. It's incredible. Check it out. Let us know how we can do whatever we need to do to help you and your company. Hope to see you guys at a future event. Also, if you want to check out Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu, it's a ministry that I'm a part of on Instagram. It's at Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu _USA. It's a ministry that I help out with Isaac, Stephen, Josh. We also have a podcast that comes out every Tuesday. We do events about every 5 to 6 weeks at different gyms. We offer free seminars. Someone shares their testimony. Then we open it up for open mat for some awesome training afterwards. I'm also a partner with a Texas beef company called Little Cattle Co.
Get that beef.
Yeah, man. My best friend Stephen Little started that company back in 2017. My wife and I partnered with them in early 2023 last year. And if you go to our website, it's littlecattle.co. We can deliver beef anywhere in the lower 48. We also have a ground beef subscription plan. I know Lucas's family is a part of that.
Yup.
I know Josh Strasburger's family is a part of that. Man, it's an awesome thing for that ground beef to be sent to you every single month. We also have a local pickup. So if you're in the Dallas Fort Worth area and you want to come by our warehouse and pick up that beef, we would love to meet you up there. I'm also a partner with Josh Strasburger and a printing company that we have called On the Path Printing. You can follow us on Instagram. It's at On the Path Printing. And then obviously all the support Origin and Jocko Fuel has given us over the years. We want to thank them. What they're doing is absolutely incredible. 100% American-made gear. They started off in the jiu-jitsu world with gis and rash guards, and now they're in the everyday clothing line, hunting line. They have 100% American-made hunt line. Just learn more about what they do and check out the products. Go to originusa.com. Also go to jockofuel.com to check out all the different supplements, get those clean, healthy energy drinks. And hey, lastly, don't forget, Leif and I have a company called Bruiser Arms, where it's Leif, Jocko, and I together working on that. It's if you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at Bruiser Arms. You can check out our website, bruiserarms.com. We'll be putting out some more content, some information on there soon for some updated classes and different products that we offer. It's awesome to be able to be doing that with Leif. His vision for that company is absolutely incredible. I'm honored to be a part of it. I'm looking forward to be able to getting back out on the range and sharing some of the things that we've learned over the years so that you can take those training lessons back home as well. And so my closing thoughts, I wanted just to elaborate on one of the things earlier. I was talking about how, without belief, nothing is possible, but with belief alone, nothing is possible. Life requires us to go out there and take action. Life requires us to put in the work. And yes, you should be competitive. You should want to win. That's actually what's needed in life for you to be able to thrive as a Christian, as a husband, as a mother, as a father, as a wife, as a son, as a daughter, as a leader, as a good human. You need to go out there and give it everything that you have. But when life throws you a curveball, when life knocks you down, which it will, you need to remain humble in defeat, get yourself back up, do a quick honest self-assessment, and get back to work. So I hope this episode has been a reminder for you to go out there and do the work that's needed and to never settle. This has been the JP Dinnell podcast, episode 35.